If you're like me, you've probably caught yourself putting off a project because you think that you need a specific piece of gear to make that project happen. You don't think that you can shoot if you aren't shooting in RAW or on full frame, or you think that your film needs to have that red or RE look. Maybe you need to shoot an anamorphic or feel that you just can't tell your story unless you have a specific lens or a really nice cinema prime. And I catch myself in this sort of thinking all the time. I used to get so caught up in specific cameras, and lately it has been specific lenses. But the truth is, these are all just excuses. You as a filmmaker might be in awe of a specific lens with specific characteristics, or, a stunning dynamic range of a specific camera, or you might be fixated on your film having, this exact characteristics of Blade Runner, The Dark Knight, or The Empire Strikes Back, or other famous Hollywood blockbusters shot on expensive anamorphics. Or maybe you just drool over anything shot on the Arri Master Primes and feel like your work just won't be any good unless you shoot on a lens like them. But here's the honest truth. Your audience doesn't care. And it's very, very rare that your lens choice is going to really affect the audience's experience in the way that you think it will. Certainly, my choice to film Blood in the Forest on the Helios 44-2 gave the film a very strong aesthetic choice that played well with the vibe that I wanted. But the DNA of the film wouldn't fundamentally have changed if I'd shot it on the Sigma Art 50mm or the Tamron 28-75 at 50mm. I shot The Way of the Jedi and Little Bloody Red on the Sigma Art lenses, and I shot Siren Scream on the Tamron 28-75. And nobody has commented on those short films that they don't look cinematic enough. In fact, most of the cast of Siren Scream were amazed how much like a proper movie the shots actually looked. Composition, color grading, location, camera work, and lighting made that film look how it did, not the exact camera or lens that I used. I could have taken any camera put out in the last 5 or 10 years with any 24-70 type lens or any prime lens with those same focal lengths and come up with similar imagery. Exactly the same? No, but very, very similar to the point where my actors and audience watching it would have had the exact same experience watching the footage no matter what I shot it on. I love gear, and I especially love lenses that offer you those unique characteristics and looks. Interesting background blur, interesting flares, unique imperfections. Vintage lenses that are a little bit less overly sharp than modern lenses. Anamorphics, all that. But while it's fun, the reality is that it can get in the way of us actually making films if we're sitting at home waiting for the perfect gear before we go out and create. Someone with an A7 III or GH5 and a kit lens actually making films is going to be way ahead of me or you if we're just sitting watching YouTube video after YouTube video about the latest camera that dropped, or this cool vintage lens, or brand new anamorphic, or really optically perfect lens that maybe might just make us feel like a filmmaker. If you're not making films, it doesn't matter whether you feel like a filmmaker or not. You aren't one unless you're actually writing, shooting, editing, and releasing projects. That's just the harsh truth. Putting something in front of that camera and lens matters infinitely more than what the camera and lens actually are. I've shot plenty of footage using the gear that I have that looks fantastic, and I am thrilled with it. And I've used that same gear and shot footage that I'm really not proud of and absolutely think looks hideous. The difference between those scenarios was always the lighting, the location, and the subject of what I was shooting. If your setup looks cheap and ugly, and the acting is terrible, no camera or lens is going to save your film. It's way more valuable to get out there and learn and play and experiment and shoot on the gear that you have than debate if you should get another piece of gear before you shoot that next movie. You'll learn so much more and have a lot more fun. Honestly, one of my favorite short films that I ever shot is called the Trigger, and it was shot on the Canon Vixia HV30, a little consumer camcorder back in 2012 that used mini DV tapes. Just camcorder HD, tiny sensor, very little background separation, awful low light, 8-bit footage. All the things that we as filmmakers are horrified about if we're here on YouTube watching video after video. And yet, the film program director at the community college I was attending when I made that film said that it was absolutely the best film to ever come out of his program. And it was not because of the gear that it was shot on. It was because of the acting, the lighting, the set design, the story, and all of the creative choices coming together. And I was literally just using cheap can lights from Home Depot clipped onto cheap stands, taping, color filters on them. We are so insanely fortunate to live in a time where we can just get cameras with robust codecs, amazing dynamic range, and beautiful image so affordably. Right now, you could literally grab a Panasonic GH4 for $200 or $300 and a cheap 25mm for $100 or $200, which would be the full frame equivalent of a 50mm, and be shooting on a hell of a lot better system than I shot the Trigger on for $400 or $500. That's half the price of most smartphones these days. The gear is not what's holding you back from being a filmmaker. So what is? Odds are, if you're like me, it's just raw fear. Fear of putting your idea out there for actors and crew to read and judge. Fear that you'll let down the people who work on your film. Fear that it will go online or to film festivals and be criticized and mocked. Fear that no one will ever see it. Fear that this idea that's in your head will not turn out at the level that you feel happy with. Fear that the film might even be a great success and you aren't ready for it to do so well. I don't know what your fears are, but I know I have and continue to feel many, if not all of these fears every time I'm thinking about making a new short film or even organizing a creative video shoot. But if you're still here with me, listen carefully to this. And I'm reminding myself of this as well. Every time I make a film, at the very worst, I learn, I connect to people, and I have a lot of fun. And more often than not, I'm incredibly proud of what I've made. And more often than not, everyone involved is proud of what we created together. So I'm going to say to myself and to you, what are you doing just sitting here at home watching video after video about gear when you could be creating? Why aren't you writing your next script? Why aren't you getting your friends or local actors together to make something? Why aren't you editing that and releasing it for the world to see? I love gear, and I plan to continue to make videos about gear in the future. And of course, I hope people will watch those videos, but I'd rather you use the gear that you have and create films that inspire you than get lost in a YouTube rabbit hole that leaves you sad and dissatisfied with your life and your gear, and your life just passes you by and you never work on your dream projects. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing for more videos on videography and filmmaking, and I'll catch you in the next video.